If you spoke to me about 10, 15 years ago and asked me my honest opinion on Mantis Kung Fu, back then I most likely would have told you, honest truth, I would have told you that my lineage, the Taiji Mantis of Tuishoshan, was the only orthodox, authentic, true and complete version of Mantis from the creator all the way down to the present day, and that every other lineage, sub-style, whatever, was diluted, modified, incomplete, watered down or whatever. That was my honest view back then. And I probably would have caveated it saying something like, oh, well, there are people that are, skilled or good practitioners of these other lineages, but they don't have the true full art. They've been lucky that they've trained very hard, but they don't have the full art. I would have said something like that, honestly. And that's kind of the environment that I was training in Yantai. I lived there for 7 or 8 years. I was training full-time with my teacher for most of that time. And that was the kind of thing that I was hearing. That was the kind of environment that I was in. And, when you hear something so much, it rubs off on you. And it's also quite conservative, the training in Shandong. People tend to be in their own little bubbles, You can't freely just go and train with other Mantis masters. You can't freely just go and, rock up to their training place and join in a class or whatever. I mean, not to say you can't have any interaction at all, and I did used to interact a lot with other foreigners, Westerners that were training with other Mantis teachers. And we used to have a lot of exchanges. We used to discuss applications. We used to even exchange forms with each other. We used to spar together. But still, there was that little bit of bias in the back of my mind that was what I believed. And they also believed the same thing with their Mantis branches, that theirs was the correct one and that mine was the incorrect one. But, we still would train together, and it was just kind of never brought up or mentioned. But what I want to say with this video is, it's such a tiresome and old argument that just goes round and round and round and never gets anywhere, and it never achieves anything. And you can go on, these Facebook groups, Reddit forums, and whatever, and you'll still see the same arguments from all those years ago, 20 plus years ago. Things that people were arguing about on Kung Fu Magazine forums in the early 2000s, they're still arguing about now that the discussions have shifted to other places, to Facebook and whatnot. And it just gets really tiresome. Honestly, I don't even go on social media anymore. I've deleted Facebook and most social media apps. Because I just get tired of it all. And it's not Mantis. It's all Kung Fu styles. And, I'm going to call out two that are particularly bad here, Wing Chun and Tai Chi. These two styles have the most drama, the highest levels of toxicity, and just the most amount of endless arguments that never amount to anything. And, Mantis, we have it as well, obviously, as I've said. But I think because we're more of a niche style, we're not as widely practiced around the world as those two styles and other styles. Perhaps the scale of the argument's not quite so intense. Alright, so before I go any further as well, I want to mention that I have recently released a masterclass for one of the oldest forms. I'm going to caveat that, one of the oldest forms, or what we understand as one of the oldest forms of Mantis Kung Fu, which is Luanjie. It's often called the mother form. So this masterclass is now live. I'll leave a link to it in the comment, as a pinned comment, and in the description. You can get 25% off. There's a few vouchers still left. I think they're probably going to expire at the end of January, so just grab one before that runs out. And this masterclass, basically I took Luangia, which is my favourite form. As I say, I believe it's the oldest form of mantis. And not only do I teach you the form, I break down all of the applications, I explain the history of it, I compare different versions, which I think is very pertinent to this video. That there's not only, one way, my way is the right way. I compare different versions and look at why different versions are done the way they are, and how that, impacts your understanding of the form, and how that gives you different variations in terms of application. So there's loads and loads of material in there. Anyway, check that out if that's something you're interested in. And let's get back to ranting about orthodoxy in martial arts. So my view really started to change when I started this channel, and I've been very lucky with the channel. I've travelled all over mainland China. I'd say I've probably been to most of the main kung fu hotspots within mainland China. Also I've done quite a bit in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Southeast Asia. Also interacted with a lot of very excellent martial artists in the Western world as well. And, I found there is this theme, this idea of orthodoxy and this lineage rivalry throughout. I mean, if I'm going to do a series on X style, for example, and, obviously I want to get 3 or 4 or 5, respective lineages to paint a whole picture of that style, then inevitably I'm going to get, people saying, oh, well, I'm the only real representative. My lineage is the only correct version of XXX style. The others are missing this key Fajin method, or they're missing this certain Shenfa, or they're missing the key forms, or they have too many forms and these other forms are not really the original ones, or, they don't have the original Chuanpu, the manuscripts written by the old masters. They've always got their justifications for why they're the true heir and the others aren't. And I'm not dissing these people. I'm not not attacking them as a person. A lot of them are very skilled martial artists, very, very nice people, very kind. But there is this view, this mindset, which I personally don't agree with. And as I started to see that, it started to make me reflect on my own biases and how I was viewing my own art. And especially going and seeing and interviewing masters from other styles of mantis, my own style of mantis. That was a really big eye-opener for me, because I wasn't really allowed to do that in Yantai. There was always this kind of thing where you only promote your own teacher, and it's kind of disrespectful to go and do that with other teachers. So I was lucky to have the opportunity to be able to do this with the channel, and I started to find, okay, well, these certain biases that I had, for example, towards 8-step mantis in Taiwan, were actually quite unfounded, because when I interviewed Master Zhang Junhao, I found that he was incredibly skilled, and you notice I talk about him a lot. He's someone who's really impressed me. He's got this amazing kind of really soft yet explosive and whippy power, and it comes from complete softness. And I became really interested in it, and while I was working in Taiwan for a few months last year, I was lucky to spend some time training with him, and that was a key thing that I wanted to learn from him and to ask him about, was how to really develop this soft power, to really sort of, because the mantis that I was practicing, that I've been practicing, is very hard and very, very aggressive, and I wanted to complement that with something different. And so he taught me some methods that would help me develop this kind of soft power, and that's really changed my mantis overall. It's not like I'm changing my forms or I'm abandoning my own lineage, but it's given me this extra quality that I didn't previously have. And also my friend Brendan Tunks in Australia, who is a practitioner of 7-star mantis, he's given me some really, really amazing insights into 7-star, and really, made me look at it with a different lens, and taught me a lot of very valuable things that I've also added into my system. And there's other examples, there's other people, and not only Mantis but other styles and things that I've encountered that I've brought into my own art, throughout the years. And I feel that that's enriched me much more as a martial artist than merely continuing to imitate and follow to a T the way things were taught to me and the way things were quote unquote always done, which, if you really look at martial art history, is not really the case. And so now when I go back and I see these old arguments still being played out on the internet, my style is the orthodox one and yours isn't, and you don't really understand the art properly, and my teacher's the only true inheritor, blah 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 blah. It just gets so tiring, because it's like, well, is this doing anything to further the art as a whole? Is it doing anything to improve your own skill, to improve your own knowledge? If you shrug that guy off over there as someone who's got incomplete, diluted system, you're robbing yourself of the ability to learn something from them, which may actually improve your own art. And even if it doesn't improve your own art, it may just give you an insight into the way something in your own art is done and why. So, there's only benefits to be had from greater interaction with the wider community and engagement and exchange, and there's only loss to be had by this protectionist attitude of my style is the only one, I have nothing, there's nothing of interest or value anywhere else. Okay, so I want to caveat this as well, that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Lineage is still a vital part of Chinese martial arts. It's an important part of the culture and the heritage. And it also serves as a benchmark. Because if you're looking for a prospective teacher, one of the first things you can do is look at their lineage, and you can see, well, who was their teacher? Who did they train under? Was their teacher someone who's regarded as pretty good? How much of the system did they learn? In Chinese martial arts, we don't have a belt system, so it can sometimes be quite hard to know if someone really has been, inherited a full system, if they're able to teach. And so looking at who their teacher is and being able to compare what they do to what their teacher does is a good way of doing this. Also looking at whether they did a Baisha ceremony and became a formal disciple. This is something that, unfortunately is being increasingly abused for financial gain these days, but it still serves as one potential benchmark among others of whether or not someone is qualified to teach and, has a certain amount of skill and knowledge. And so, you do want to look for someone who's studied with reputable teachers and has the permission of those teachers to pass on the art. That is something that's important, that they didn't just, go to a couple of seminars, learn a few forms, and then just kind of make everything up, because there are a lot of people, including some who are quite well known online, unfortunately, that do that. And so, lineage does serve its a purpose of kind of filtering that out to some extent. Now, another benefit of lineage is what I would say puts the art in martial arts, and perhaps one of the things that makes, not perhaps, definitely is one of the things that makes Chinese martial arts so unique and so special and so interesting, and that is all the variety that comes with all these different lineages. You see, I know there's been attempts and talk of trying to standardize Chinese martial arts, to have one unified kung fu, much like has happened with other arts. But I think, if you do that, you lose what makes it special, because, it's the variety of things, and it's being able to look at a practice done different ways. It's being able to see a form looking different, by different, done differently by different practitioners, or to see a different approach to power generation, or a different strategy to applying the key words, the key ideas of the art. It's that that makes it so fascinating, and to have these unique and different variations is a beautiful thing. Different lineages, you can think of it as dialects or accents even within a language, and there's a lot of wisdom contained within that diversity. I mean, yes, it's good to have a unifying standard that everybody can communicate with each other, but you shouldn't also let that come at the expense of losing the beauty, the wisdom, the collective experience that comes within these unique different dialects. And I always think of martial arts as exactly the same thing. And the way that I view my own art now is that I have, I still believe the art that I gained was a very strong and very solid lineage, and I'm very, very grateful for it. But I've now moved to the stage where I want to take this art into my own. And, so I have been looking to other teachers, to other ways of doing things, even the way that things are done within other Chinese martial arts, to see what kind of what valuable insights I can gain from things like, old style Shaolin, Xinyi Liu He, Baji Quan, Tongbei, all sorts of different things that I've been bringing in to my own practice to try and improve various things. And so I'm going to end this with a quote from my new Mantis teacher, Wang Shuyuan. So I started training with Wang Shuyuan early last year because I was so blown away by his Mantis and his approach to teaching and his level of knowledge. And one of the first things he said to me, which always stuck with me, and it was one of the decisive things that made me want to become his student, was he said to me, if you train with me for 10 years and then your art looks exactly like mine, I've failed you as a teacher. He said that you have to learn what I do, you have to understand why I'm teaching you things a certain way, you have to put the work in, and you have to, really make an effort to do what I'm telling you to do. But you have to go beyond that, and you have to be able to really understand the art and to develop the art by yourself. And over time you will end up changing things and you will end up developing things, and that's exactly what he's done. He trained with several different teachers, both of Taiji and Meihua, Hao family lineages, and he's essentially made his own, what would you say, a coagulation, I suppose, of what he's learnt from all these old generation greats. And so, that for me was like, this is the person I want to train with. And so I've been very much, as I said, trying to do that with my own practice. And so just want to end repeating myself again by saying, guys, we're all Mantis practitioners, we're all Wing Chun practitioners or Tai Chi practitioners, or we all love the same art and we all venerate the founders and the great masters of the past. Why are we all bickering among ourselves over who got it right and who got it wrong? Why don't we all just come together and learn from each other and make the art better as a whole? And that is my rant over. Thank you guys so much for listening, and as always, I really, really appreciate your support, and I shall see you in another video.